So this is the actual working draft of the full report, without the appendices and some other things that we have to add to it. I'm not going to go through each. I'm going to go through an overview of it, and I'm not going to go through each individual 68 pages of it. As Sam said, the first question is, what is the point of doing this? And there's a couple of reasons just to expand on what Megan and Sam has already said. If you look at some of the major pieces of federal legislation that was recently passed, the Infrastructure Act, as well as the CHIPS Act, most of the money that is in those two pieces of legislation are not formula based, meaning that every community in the United States or region is going to get some chunk of money based upon some formula of federal distribution. Almost all of the money is competitive. And the way the federal funding for a lot of this works is one of the first questions they're going to ask you when you're applying for one of these competitive grants is, do you have a SEDS plan, and does this conform to the SEDS plan? And so that's the real purpose of doing this. The other piece is, as Sam said, back in 2014, it was finished in around 2016. We did the Grow Smart Plan, which was try to create a vision for the region. The RiverCog, as you know, had done the Regional Plan of Conservation and Development, and then also recently there was a Regional Housing Plan, and this kind of ties those pieces together through the lens from economic development. This is the process that we went through. We basically had 3 phases. We did a base conditions analysis. We looked at economic conditions, population, workforce, land use. We had some steering committees. We did a key issues survey. Then we went through a couple of public workshops. As you all know, we met with representatives of every community in the region, as well as business groups, workforce, major employers, a whole series of people. And then we're now in this kind of last stage where we have some preliminary recommendations. By federal requirement, it has to go out for a 30-day public review, which starts Wednesday, but we're giving you all a preview. And so you can see where we are right here. With the goal being is to use the month of February to basically do the public review. And then, Megan, correct me if I'm wrong, the idea is to try to get this adopted in early March, correct?
That's correct, yep.
Okay. So this gives you an overview of the process. These are some of the public engagement things that we did. We did the steering committee. We did the economic development and planning representatives from every community, business groups. We did these online surveys, more steering committee workshops, 2 public workshops, plus a bunch of pop-up workshops. We did a large employer and diversity training discussion. More steering committee workshops to kind of go through the review and the findings. And again, here's where we are. So these numbers over here, 208 participants, 57 comments received, those will change because of the public comment process, but that's kind of where we are at this moment in time. So just a quick overview, because some of you have seen some of this. Just some quick facts about the economy. The region has fully recovered from the pandemic in terms of both GDP, jobs, and incomes. Employment has grown, but some of the key employment sectors like healthcare and some other places have not changed basically since 2014. Self-employment, which is, if you can see the little hand cursor atop this top yellow versus the more burnt orange, self-employment, it continues to grow. And then you import a majority of your workers, but you also export a lot of workers into the other region. Your workforce is also getting older and more diverse than is the local population. And you can see that you've added some jobs here and payroll establishments as well. The key private sector employer is healthcare and social assistance. The next one is manufacturing, and then it's retail, trade, hospitality, administrative and waste services, but this is really back office kind of work, then construction, and then it falls, as you can see, pretty dramatically. But the self-employment is also important. The self-employment, for example, adds about more than 3,000 people to professional and technical employment. So it essentially doubles the number of people who are working for wages and salaries as employees. And then you also pick up another 5,000 people who are working in the real estate sector. So the self-employment in some key areas is really important. This is basically the inflow outflow of workers. These are where the obvious job centers are. That's not surprising to anybody. But basically what we learned in the process is that you import, don't get hung on the specific number because it's the way the feds do the calculation. You import somewhere around 37,000 people to work. About 25,000 residents stay in the region to work, and 54,000 residents leave. So clearly the residents are here because most of them want to be here and are finding employment somewhere else. And then you can see what the wage difference is. This is the average wage, which is about 61,000 or 62,000. About half of the industry sectors pay more and about half of the industry sectors pay less. Some of the key sectors like manufacturing, et cetera, pay substantially more. And again, when you guys go through this, you'll be able to read and get all the detail. And then this, we just break out into incomes and some of the population issues. This shows you what's happened in terms of diversity compared to previously. The workforce does continue to get older. It's gone from about 25% over the age of 55 to now it's up to 28%. And 36% of the manufacturing workforce is over 55. And again, it is a key sector for the region. One of the other things I want to point out as well is the growth in retirement income. Retirement income, when we did this work back in 2014, was 12%. It's now up to 16%. So a bigger and bigger chunk of the region's spending power, if you will, is basically becoming fixed income. And then we did not address the housing issue directly because of the great work that was already done in the regional housing plan. We just refer to it here. So kind of key industry concentrations. The way to look at this is the United States equals 1. Manufacturing here is 64% more manufacturing than the nation as a whole. You have a lot of education. Arts, rec, and entertainment, which is not a surprise. And even though healthcare and social assistance is by far the largest employer, you're only about 25% above what the nation is. And then down here just gives you a little bit more detail and really more specific industry levels. Back in 2014, the 2016 work for GrowSmart, we noted that there were 4 different types of economies taking place, and there still is. There is the traded goods sector, which is built around manufacturing and distribution, and that is still a major employer of around 14,000 people. There's about 13,000 people who we've dubbed kind of working in the lifestyle economy. These are people who are employed or self-employed, who are working in things that you can do anywhere. One of the things that became really interesting in here is the emergence of non-store retailers and electronic market makers and brokers, which have about 1,000 employees. That category basically didn't exist the last time we did this work. And then you've got the resident economy, which is dependent upon the local residents as well as the seasonal households. And then you have the tourism economy, which we explain in much greater depth here. And you'll see we came up with some really interesting statistics. One of the things that came up a number of times during our interview process and things was kind of the lack of hotels. And one of the things that we learned is that the overnight stay capacity in the region is much bigger than people think. There's somewhere between 500 and 600 Airbnbs. There's around 1,400 plus campsites. And there's a number of transient marina slips, which we were not able to get a really good handle on. So there's quite a bit of overnight capacity. There's basically 2,000 additional nights, if you will, of over and above what existing hotel capacity is. One of the things that we also wanted to look at is tax-based growth. As you know, as I don't need to tell you all, cities and towns in Connecticut are very dependent on property taxes. And obviously, the more industrial and commercial you have, the less burden on residential. One of the things that we learned, only 3 lower Connecticut River Valley communities saw their commercial and industrial values grow as a percentage of their tax base going all the way back to 2001. And so there becomes this issue, particularly as fixed income becomes a bigger and bigger percentage of the overall income, is how do we pay for government going forward? We also then looked at resilience and hazard issues. We basically did a summary of the really great work that was done for the Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan, and we just summarized that. So when you see this, just so you know, one of the requirements now in the CEDS, which did not exist 5 years ago, is to look at resilience as part of the economic development plan. And then we just did some flood zone maps. So then we started looking at what is the growth, physical growth potential for the community. And again, because there's a lot of information in here how this was done. When you read it, you'll understand kind of what the filtering process was. And we walk through this process, and you'll see this algorithm. And when you read through it, it becomes very self-explanatory how we got to where we got. But if you're starting, the way to think about this is that there's 284,000 acres of land overall across the River Cog region. And there are about 1,500 acres that are vacant land that doesn't have any regulatory or environmental limitations, and is meaning it's also zoned with the appropriate entitlements. Just for frame of reference, that is 0.005%, not 5%, 0.005%. It's not even 1%. And then you've got about 2,700 acres of land that is not vacant, but it may be underutilized based upon how much building coverage there already is. So there's not a lot to work with, but there's not zero, but there's also not, it's not also not Texas, if you will. It doesn't have infinite amount of land to work with. And then we just broke it down into more, which you can see here about what the parcel sizes are. That's essentially what this is. And then we did it we cut the area, we cut the River Cog into a series of kind of regions, just so you could see kind of where the locations of this land is. So what we heard from the community, again, we had an extensive public input process, workshops, and then what we did to leverage the great work that was done in the Plan of Conservation and Development, is that we took the SWOT analysis, which is also a requirement for a CEDS. We took the SWOT analysis, which was, correct me if I'm wrong, it's much more extensive for the POCD, and we ended up pulling out the pieces that we thought had the most relevance to economic development issues in the region, particularly based upon what we had heard. And so this is what the SWOT analysis you'll just see, and this comes from the POCD process. And then we had some discussion groups. We had the 90 surveys. We asked people what their priorities were, what the biggest challenges were. And this is essentially summed up in the community voices section. And then you can see where the survey responses came down.
Excuse me, it's hard
Sure.
to read those 2 pages. Can you just tell us what they are?
Well, you're going to get them. So, but the biggest issue, the greatest barrier to business growth was by about a third of the people, by a third was infrastructure, the lack of inadequate infrastructure. And then the next biggest issue was availability of housing, and then it basically tails off. And then
interesting, because your statistics show that availability of land is an issue, and it doesn't show up here.
That's yes, because we were asking what people's perceptions of
Right.
problems are, issues are. And then there's also some other important things here around, like, disinterested communities and things like that. And then down here, let me see if I can pull this up. The view was that there's too few businesses, just the right amount of business, and what the region should be focused on is the big one was attracting more tech, digital biomed, but there's some land implications for that and infrastructure implications for that. And even though that might be the goal, where it's not clear to me that's easy to do. And then on the survey responses, potential initiatives to promote economic development. The biggest one was reuse and repurpose vacant and underutilized land, make sure that regulations can deal with the changing business environment, and then agritourism, and then market the region as an innovative and family-friendly place. And then it falls pretty significantly after that.
So can I just ask
Sure.
a question?
Yeah.
Back on the last page,
Okay.
the number one response when you just went into regular neighborhoods, they felt that vacant land was underutilized.
The people who responded to the survey.
Oh, and the survey was sent to regular.
No, it was sent to the planning, zoning, and Megan, it was you have a list. It was from the POCD list.
Yeah, I'm curious as to who thought that was the number one issue, because that doesn't seem like man on the street response. So yeah, I'd be curious, and only because there's such little. You quoted that percentage of vacant land remaining.
Well, there's a lot of vacant land. The issue is vacant land that has the appropriate entitlements and doesn't have regulatory restrictions like environmental restrictions.
Because I know there's a big movement for acquiring more open space, which seems like the opposite of the survey results, that a lot of people want more open space. Okay, I just wanted to ask about who is saying that's the number one issue for them.
Good, really good question.
I'm also curious what regular person says, oh, the barrier to growth is infrastructure.
So if I could jump in.
I don't want to make fun, but I would like to have
Yeah.
an example of a response. Who said that? And
Yeah.
how does
If you
a
said
regular person
developers-
talk about infrastructure?
Yes,
Is it
exactly.
highway? Is it rail? Is it a bridge? Is it a sewer system?
This survey was actually sent to planning and zoning commissions, to our CEOs, to the economic development commissions. So it wasn't just a general survey. It was targeted.
Clearly not a general public survey. Who are the CEOs again?
The chief elected officials
Of each
all
town?
of our 17 towns. Yeah.
So that would be the mayor, the first selectman?
Correct. And the board of selectmen as well.
Would we
city
be
council.
allowed to see these raw responses? And I don't want them identified if you want to protect the person who said it. I have to say, this just sounds strange.
Yeah.
And it's 55%, or no, it's not.
Well, remember something, that they weren't limited to picking one thing. They could pick multiple things. 55% of the pool said that reuse and repurpose of vacant and or underutilized land was important.
I just want to say that a few pages ago, it looked like you went to the general community, and then 3 slides later, we see a survey response. So the segue, I think, just startled me, because I'm like, wait a minute, that's not a general community response. This is like a developer response or something like that. So I just want to go on the record that, the segue was too tight. It gives the impression that the general population is responding to the survey. That's all. It's a presentation thing.
Thanks.
Good comment. Do you want to continue with the presentation?
Yep, go ahead.
So on the next page, this is the responses we got back from the general public in our 2 public workshops and the pop-ups that were done. And so these were what people thought were the top issues. And then you can see issue 1 and issue 3 were identified as the priority.
It is it's a little hard to read those. Can you read them for us or enlarge it?
Sure, I just enlarged it to the degree that I can. So issue 1, it was pursuing tech companies such as Digital Biomed Aerospace is a priority, but inadequate infrastructure such as sites, sewer, roads, utilities, and limited large sites. There are limited large sites for development. And then issue 3 was region needs workers, but demography, e.g. aging population, more diverse younger populations, is shifting, and housing affordability and availability is a major workforce and population retention issue.
And these were selected as priorities by whom?
What? General public. They want more development. I'm sorry. I
don't know how you can say that people want more development.
That's what it says. The number 1 priority.
No, the number 1 priority says that there's inadequate infrastructure to do this.
And limited large sites for development. I don't think that's the number 1 issue for a typical Connecticut Valley resident.
But it actually is a major issue that we face for economic development purposes.
Then can you define in building size and parking lot size what that means? Because there is plenty of space in Middletown, Connecticut. There's plenty of space in all these 17 towns.
There are vacancies in Middletown.
So Kevin will get to that in the presentation that we did that exercise. So
we did. There's 1,400 acres across the entire region.
All right. So why don't you continue with the presentation, and we'll hold off the questions a little bit and let you finish, and then we'll have lots of questions for you, I'm sure.
Well, it would be, yes. I mean, I'm happy to do that. It'd be great for the comment period. You do need to be able to read some of the wording of this, but just for frame of reference of what you're asking, of this 1,400 acres, 273 parcels are under 5 acres. So we did do this analysis. There's only 18 parcels that are over 20 acres and have the existing entitlements to allow for development. And then other initiatives, let me blow this up. So potential initiatives to promote economic development, we ask people to put their top 3. Encourage infill development in existing town centers and along transit corridors. Reuse and repurpose vacant and underutilized land. Training for residents, and local regulations that are keeping pace with the changing business environment. Those were the top 4 issues. And then it falls pretty dramatically after that. So what we are, so the vision is basically built off of the POCD and the housing plan that's already been approved. And I'm not going to read this, but you can see what it is. It's to be culturally and ethically diverse, better connected, supportive of innovation and innovative industries, and attractive to a skilled workforce, and grow in balance with its natural resources. And so what is the strategic direction? One is providing the capacity and resource to promote a growing and equitable economy, which basically what we came through when we talked to all of 13 communities, is there's a lack of literal ability, resources, people, money to do some of the kinds of development or redevelopment that people are interested in seeing happen. The other one is supporting the development of economic infrastructure, which is broadly defined, which is water, sewer, broadband, which is interesting given the conversation that was going on before we started, and the right kinds of buildings and connectivity to jobs with the right kinds of transit support. Sustainable and resilient communities, again, being very cautious about where any new development or redevelopment takes place, particularly given some of the issues that the region has related to flooding potential, as well as storm surge and other elements. And then making sure that we respect the high quality of life options for all residents. That is really, this last piece is really kind of the main driver of the region, and it's important to keep that focus. So what does that mean? So basically what we've done is we've structured a series of recommendations, what the underlying rationale is, what the implementation looks like that are built around kind of metrics and milestones, who might be partners, and what some of the timeframes might be for this. And so the first one is a regional economic development resource that can support the region's municipalities with grant writing, project management, and some technical expertise. There's a number of communities that are very small. The economic development or planning commission boards are volunteers. In some cases, they'll have planning staff, but they won't have any development staff, or the planning staff will do everything and can't really get involved in trying to shepherd certain types of projects of redevelopment that people are interested in. The need for a regional brand and identity and a marketing campaign to market the region to tourists. I don't know how many of you know this. RiverCog is actually split between 2 tourism regions in the state, which I think might be one of the only places that it is. And it's interesting given that it has its own unique storyline, if you will. We need to come out with a regional outreach and advisory program that can get the underrepresented groups that are becoming a larger part of the population, and to make sure that there is a way for them to have a voice in some of the things that are taking place. We need to create a regional leadership program that, in coordination with the business community and other kind of community interest groups, to help train resources for potential future commissioners, officials, and other volunteer positions. It was noted that there is not a pipeline of younger people who are going to take over these roles as some of the current membership retires or rolls off these boards. So economic infrastructure, we take the broad view of what infrastructure is. So in this case, it's opportunities for broadband expansion, basically across the region. And there's a lot of federal money available right now to do that, but you need a plan to do that. And again, we still have to figure out the partners and time frame, which is part of what we're hoping you all can help us with. Looking at alternative wastewater treatment options, there are new wastewater technologies that are coming online in other parts of the United States that can serve the role of, instead of building out a massive expensive sewer system. There are issues from a regulatory perspective in Connecticut in terms of doing those, but given the nature of the communities here, we think it's something that makes some sense to do. People are very interested in culinary and food products incubator because of the region's agricultural industry and the region's agricultural industry's need to diversify its revenues. Again, trying to do a better job, which the region is working on through its own transit plan, about connecting the employment centers with some multimodal transportation access. And recognizing that we need some supportive amenities and services for remote workers, up to and including being very creative about how we can potentially create shared workspaces. And again, there's a range of milestones here about what that might look like. And then the secure resources for high priority infrastructure projects. This is water, sewer, road expansion, streetscape improvements. We are in part of the appendix. What will support this recommendation is a list of those projects that the communities have identified. And then the sustainable and resilient communities. It's a high priority of reuse of redevelopment opportunities and secure resources to begin that process. For those of you who may or may not know, redevelopment of existing sites, particularly if there's existing buildings on it, is more expensive than building greenfield, but it is clearly a priority for people who are interested in development in the region. And there needs to be figuring out what are the priority areas and how do we put together money to help make that happen. Again, similar idea, infill development along town centers and kind of underutilized commercial corridors. As you all noted, there are vacancies. Taking advantage of those vacancies and underutilized sites, again, requires a level of expertise and resources to be able to do that because of the way the economics of development work. We want to discourage intensive development along environmentally sensitive areas or high-risk zones. Basically, potentially the way some of the zoning works across the region, there may be some of these areas some zoning should be changed, frankly. And creating a business resiliency and recovery plan for business as well as government. You know, the issue here is really the potential flooding risk and storm surge risk is the biggest number, and has the potential to affect some of the larger communities disproportionately. And this is something that RiverCog is already beginning to look at and how to do. And then one of the things that came up during our interviews with businesses was, particularly for certain specialized things, most of the businesses are too small, and the region is too small to adequately support kind of specialized training programs that some of these businesses need, particularly whether it's healthcare or what have you. And really begin thinking about how to work with regional workforce development agencies and other regions that have smaller employers who are probably likely facing similar things, and figuring out how to pool resources to do that. For the agriculture industry, one of the things that is going to be important is, given their size, and particularly around as it relates to acreage and the kind of what they produce and their costs, is helping them diversify their operations that are compatible with their agricultural uses and what that might look like. Some of that is a zoning challenge, some of that is an infrastructure challenge, and in that case, I mean things like a food incubator and other ports and other pieces. It's a grant writing expertise to help them secure money to look at potential ways to diversify their operations if we want to maintain the ag industry. On the housing, again, the housing is built off of the housing plan that was approved. So it's, again, just a diverse range of housing price points that's reflective of the wages. Promoting mixed use, walkable, vibrant communities in the town centers. Continued investment and improvements to the region's parks, trails, and public outdoor amenities. And that's essentially it. So the plan is, this will be circulated to you all for comment. You'll be able to read in more depth what was actually written in here. But we wanted to give you an overview and flavor of what is coming forward.